Every time someone gave me a glass of wine, I thought they were playing a trick on me, or they were going to like laugh at me when I didn't pick the right taste profile or the right variety or the right year. Like I just thought I was going to get laughed out of the room if I couldn't tell a 2005, Burgundy from a 2006. And I thought everybody knew more than they actually did.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. As we've discussed, the events of 2020 forced many to pivot and change their business models to survive. For many, it was an awakening, a chance to change their business in ways they never thought they had the time or the bravery to do. Others have opened businesses over the last 12 months, and the insights garnered during this time have allowed them to create hospitality models that are far more resilient. Max Walker is the owner of Paranormal Wines in Campbell in the ACT. Max, how you going?
I'm good, thanks, mate. How are you?
I'm good. You're literally moments away from opening your very first venue. How does that feel?
It feels pretty weird. It's. I don't know. It's. I think it would be a surreal feeling for for anybody that's doing it, but to be doing it in this setting I'm still wrapping my head around it and processing it. But no, it's really exciting. Very, very exciting.
Well, you've worked in award-winning venues in Melbourne and Sydney, and you're now in the capital in Canberra. Tell us, why did you come to Canberra in the first place?
My partner Georgia, we met when I was living in Sydney, and she is from Canberra. We after dating for a little while, we decided to visit Canberra, and the only other time I'd been to Canberra was when I was about 14 years old with my dad. I'm originally from New Zealand, and he's quite a prominent architect in New Zealand, and architects hate planned cities. So we remember driving through Canberra, and he was just ragging on it the whole time about how there's too many roundabouts and too much space, and it's not organic because it's all planned and it's one man's vision, and it shouldn't be, city shouldn't be like this, And then obviously, I moved to Australia when I was about 22, moved to Melbourne, and then subsequently lived in Sydney as well. And everybody they just rag on Canberra. So it's not really fair, really. And so anyway, I obviously started dating someone that was from Canberra, and then visited the city. And when you kind of go somewhere with someone who knows where the cool stuff is and what the right thing to do is, you see it through a completely different lens. Also, I was lucky enough to have a good friend of mine, Nick Smith, open a bar called Bar Rockford, and then had heard a lot about that and really wanted to visit. And then me and Georgia visited, and we walked upstairs up into this amazing bar, and I was like, fuck, this is awesome. This is not even like a great bar in Canberra. This is a great bar like Australia, Australian standard. Then from there, we just kind of discovered all sorts of great markets, other great venues, amazing parks. And then, just kind of gradually thought maybe we should just move here, maybe let's turn the holiday into our lives, really. So, yeah.
Well, the food scene has really changed quite a lot in the last 5 to 10 years in Canberra. It's quite extraordinary. And as you say, there's some venues that could hold their own in some of the best cities in the world.
Yeah.
And Paranormal Wines is something a bit different, not just for Canberra, but for Sydney or Melbourne as well. Can you tell us the idea behind Paranormal Wines?
Yeah, so Paranormal Wines, I'll give you the spiel, is a sort of, I guess, a natural wine focused bottle shop. That I guess the unique aspect about it is that we do offer a drink-in option for a small corkage. So essentially, we're a bottle shop and a bar. So it's more of it's not really an original idea. It's a very kind of European model. I mean, it was kind of inspired through a couple of years ago. Georgia and I went to London and Paris, and going to places like P. Franco and the Le Cave de Septime in Paris, and just these amazing kind of little bottle shops that were kind of just more than bottle shops. They were kind of a space to you could have a little snack, you could kind of chat. you could take away stuff, you could have in, and it was just a really different setting to like appreciate all these kind of amazing, kind of interesting wines that I'd never seen before or seen photos of, and I'd never been able to get my hands on in Australia, and just be served by someone, wearing a t-shirt, who's very kind of like, just in a really relaxed, casual setting, and it just kind of stripping all the pretense away, was something that I really stuck with me and resonated. And so, that's, I guess, how the idea was born.
Did the concept change at all given the events of 2020 with the pandemic and the impact that it had on the hospitality sector?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the concept was born in the pandemic. I guess the roots of it, the seeds of it, were planted during those trips to the trip to Europe. But this is definitely a COVID business. I was lucky enough to be working at Bar Rockford at the start of the year. Georgia had started her job. We moved in December, and I started working. So she started working in December, and I started working in January, and was just loving it. And just I was getting to sell some really cool wine, working with some really great people, really lovely team there, and just serving. Getting to meet a lot of the Canberra hospitality community working there, because it's kind of like it's a kind of unofficial knockoff spot for hospo there, and lots of interesting people. It's a bit of a hub, so got to meet some really great other kind of interesting operators and staff that worked at different venues, and was just having a great time. Really enjoying myself. And then obviously COVID hit, and as a casual employee that hadn't been working for the company for very long, and also being a New Zealand citizen, I wasn't eligible for any benefits. So that was pretty hard. But we were lucky enough to be in a position where we live in a nice house in Ainslie, and Georgia has a pretty stable job that didn't get too affected by COVID. So it was just, I guess born out of me, like, okay, bit of a, as everybody, a lot of people that have been on this podcast, those going through those moments of like, me sitting at home with no job thinking, are restaurants ever going to be a thing anymore? Like, are people going to like have the money to go to restaurants and spend $100 on a bottle of wine and $50 on a steak? Like, I don't know if they are. If maybe this is, the apocalypse mode sets in, and you're like, you don't know, there's just so much uncertainty. And, with the, obviously hospitality being hit harder than most industries because of, all the hygiene stuff, and it's seen as it definitely is seen as a kind of a luxury by a lot of people, and I didn't know whether it was going to be a luxury that people then decided they couldn't afford to spend money on anymore. So what's all this? I've been working in restaurants for 15 years and learning how to carry 3 plates and knowing what Chardonnay to match with people's roast chicken, and maybe that's not important anymore. Nobody cares. It's not that's not life. It's not saving lives. So I was a bit in the wilderness a little bit.
What did it feel like being from New Zealand and living in Australia, and we're kind of like pretty close mates, even though we're different countries, to be sort of left out of the government's equation in regards to support? How did you feel about that?
Look, I mean, I'm pretty pragmatic about these things, and it's like everybody's in a different position. I was lucky enough to be in a position where I wasn't out on the street. I was, had a partner with a stable job. So I was very, very much luckier than most. The sad thing about COVID is it's really affected people mainly closer to the poverty line than myself. So I felt, I'm just grateful to have a roof over my head, really. Like the government, I mean, I have been, a resident here for 12 years and paid all the taxes and, done everything by the book, and then to not be eligible for things, that's annoying. But, for me, it wasn't, I was more sort of, concerned by what's happening to other people that were in a worse situation than me. Like, yeah.
Well, you one of the leading somms in Australia in regards to taking the intimidation out of the wine experience. You're really forward-thinking in regards to just celebrating the drink that it is in casual environment, and Paranormal Wines is very much about that. How did it all start for you, hospitality?
I grew up in Wellington, and in New Zealand, and I was lucky enough to, as a child, spend a bit of time in Europe. I had an auntie and uncle and cousins that lived in a small town in the northern part of Italy, near the Slovenian border, and we got to travel there a couple of times. And we just, I don't know, food was always part of my life. Like my mum was a really good cook. Dad he's just like the biggest fan of restaurants in the world. He's just like kind of he's he is the man about town in Wellington CBD. Like everybody, for many years I was known as Roger Walker's son, just because he was just he would frequent all the local haunts and latest restaurants, and he was a real champion of taking me out to restaurants from a very young age. I remember trying sushi when I was like 8 years old, and all these things that I was very exposed to a lot of really amazing cuisine, and it was always seen as a really kind of important thing within my family. And I guess, so I started, he was a regular at a restaurant called Cafe Brava, which is now something else, but that was at the bottom of Courtney Place in Wellington's kind of CBD. And a guy called Christian McCabe was working there. And then Christian and his business partner, Sam Chapman, and then Leon, they ended up buying an old Swiss cafe called the Matterhorn on Cuba Street, and redid that into a kind of a bar, and then more into a restaurant. And Christian also went to, because Wellington's a tiny place, he also went to primary school with my stepbrother. So I went in when I was probably just on 18, and had a couple of beers and maybe a mojito, and thought, wow, this is pretty cool. Eventually got a job. Christian was looking for like I think my technical title was stock boy. So just essentially a lackey to Matterhorn. Was kind of as clever a businessman as Christian is. Was kind of ill-advised that the cellar was actually upstairs. So every delivery I had to, every box of wine, every carton of soft drink I had to ferry upstairs. So I got pretty fit, and split a few jeans. Tried to wear cool tight jeans to work as the fashion was. Everybody wanted to dress like a member of the Strokes back then, and just split a couple of pairs of jeans, carrying boxes. So I learnt to wear loose fitting clothing. And then essentially my job was to kind of organise the cellar, check off all the deliveries. They had a really big wine list, so it was just kind of categorising all that sort of stuff, and then just doing the prep. So Matterhorn was kind of probably one of the busiest bars in town. Also over the filming of like the Lord of the Rings trilogy, all the like Elijah Wood and all those guys would come and hang out. It was a bit of a crazy hotspot. So I was just, one of my jobs was prepping for the bar. So I used to make like buckets of Bloody Mary mix. I used to count 30 punnets of limes a day, pick 15 punnets of mint, because everybody was fucking drinking mojitos, and making heaps of sugar syrup. And so I just kind of worked during the day, and then when the bartenders came in, everything was kind of ready to go. And now, having been a bartender now, that was pretty fucking it's pretty lucky, bartenders, having some 18-year-old doing all your prep for you, like that was my first job. And then Christian and Sam opened another venue next door to the Matterhorn called Mighty Mighty, which is more like a Berlin style kind of loose nightclub bar, which was really fun. And that was a gig venue. And then I ended up working behind the bar there, and playing in a band that we used to play there quite often. And it was a good little it was a good little hub, that little Cuba Street precinct. And got to meet a lot of good Wellington locals, and ended up meeting a couple of guys I would end up working with quite closely in the future. It was a good time to be in hospitality. Exciting. And in Wellington, having someone like Dave Verhall, who now has gone on to do the Town Mouse and Embler in Melbourne. Like when he started as head chef, everybody's very excited, and suddenly all this different kind of food was coming out, and all these Wellingtonians had to had to deal with share plates. It was like everybody hated it. They're like, where's the protein and 2 veg? Like, what do you mean? Like, what do you mean it's just a pork chop? Where's the veg? Just those conversations going on and on and on. It was a really exciting time to be in Wellington for sure.
Well, speaking of shared plates, you worked at a venue in Melbourne that was really part of the revolution of shared plates in Australia with the Movida Group. What was it like working with Frank?
It was great. Yeah. Really, really amazing group. I was there for 6 years, so I kind of hated it that much. But it was, that's really kind of where I was never like, that was where I learnt the most about hospitality, really. Like at the Matterhorn and Mighty Mighty, I was, pouring beers and, making the odd drink and learning how to serve people. But I wasn't working. They're definitely, the Matterhorn was a restaurant, but I wasn't. I was the kind of behind the scenes guy there. Learning how to be a proper bartender at a one hat restaurant, and learning all the Spanish words for food and all the different sizes of the dishes. I remember that really made my head spin, like tapas clásicas and raciones and like all the different sections and it was a real wake up call, and a real kind of I had to absorb a lot of information very fast, but it was just super exciting. I was working at Movida Aqui the whole time, which is a big over 200 seat restaurant in the middle of Melbourne. So Wellington's relatively cosmopolitan, but then to be suddenly working in a giant, well-known Spanish restaurant on Little Bourke Street, full of hundreds and hundreds of Australians, particularly, was quite daunting. I learned to really twang up the Aussie accent and try and stifle the New Zealand mumble, because when you're dealing with white collar lawyers and bankers that you don't really have time to repeat things, and they want their drink straight away, or they want to order their shirt and get back to their conversation with their clients. So it was a great learning experience, and obviously some amazing chefs, not just Frank, but working with people like Ewan Crawford was just an amazing, incredible chef, and people like Scott Williams, who's gone on to do really great things in Sydney with Ragazzi and Fabrica and other chefs. Just too many to mention. It was a really exciting kitchen for they just had all the gadgets, all the best produce, all the coolest tasting Iberico jamón for the first time, and working with all this amazing seafood. I was very, very lucky to be there.
When did wine become a part of your conversation and really important key to your career?
It was actually, it was later on. I've been a bartender. I was a bartender first and foremost. I was really into, got into beer, got into craft beer when that sort of took off, I guess. That was probably still back in New Zealand. Wine was always something that I found always put in the too hard basket. It's too tricky, too curly, too many variables, too many foreign words. There's too many grape varieties, don't understand. And I was just really really terrified of wine, as a lot of people are. I was worried that Matterhorn had a huge wine list, and but I remember a couple of moments actually, growing up in New Zealand, I wasn't that enamored with New Zealand wine, Marlborough Sauvignon Blanc and Citrello Targo Pinot weren't my favourite things, and they were the things that we were really known for. And so I was like, okay, I'm not really into that thing. I'll rather drink a hoppy IPA from California than drink a kind of cat's pissy, grassy Sauvignon Blanc. But I remember one day Christian poured me a glass of wine, and I was like, I tasted it, and it just tasted so incredible. It wasn't tropical, it wasn't super acidic. It just tasted really energetic and lively and really beautiful. And I was like, what was that? And he was like, that was a Sauvignon Blanc. And I was like, no, it wasn't. And he's like, yeah, it was. And I'm like, no, it wasn't. It was like, every time someone gave me a glass of wine, I thought they were playing a trick on me, or they were going to laugh at me when I didn't, pick the right taste profile or the right variety or the right year. I just thought I was going to get laughed out of the room if I couldn't tell a 2005, Burgundy from a 2006. And I thought everybody knew more than they actually did. But I never. I just thought he was pranking me. I was just like, "That's not a Sauvignon Blanc." He's like, "Yeah, that's a Sancerre. That's a wine from the Loire Valley in France, which is kind of known as the home of Sauvignon Blanc." He's like, "That's what Sauvignon Blanc should taste like." And I was like, "Okay." And then he did the same thing with Burgundy, with Pinot. He did the same thing with like Chardonnay with Chablis, and I was like, holy shit, this stuff's really delicious. And but then I kind of didn't really. I was still in my kind of beer and cocktail world, learned a little bit about spirits, and then obviously working at my Vita, it was really great. I guess the gateway was like sherry, and a lot of us were also getting into like sour beers from Belgium and stuff like that. And then sherry has all those kind of weird kind of tertiary notes that are non-food related, so you get those really kind of really kind of oxidized, strange, salty, or just not so much not food, but things that are like when you get like savory elements in wine, and not things that don't taste like fruit. When you start getting things like taste like vegetables and proteins and dairy and stuff like that, I just found that really like exciting. Here's a thing that's made with fruit that tastes like salt water with, I don't know, freshly shaved asparagus in it or something. And then I guess, then there was all these wines that we weren't allowed to sell to. I remember there was a bottle of Tom Shawbrook's Giallo, which was made with Sauvignon Blanc back then. And the Somme, Locke was like, okay, so this wine here, the weird one with the cloudy one with the paper label, is like, do not sell that to someone that orders a Sauvignon Blanc. Do not do it. Under no circumstances sell that to someone that asks for a Sauvignon Blanc. They will spit it back in your face. So I was like, wow, what's this all about? This kind of natural wine thing. And then there was like, we'd have these, we were pouring wines by, we'd special wine by someone like Pat Sullivan, like a Pinot, and then, the suits would send it back. And I was like, that's cool. why don't they like that? That's kind of really intriguing to me. And, it was whether it was a little bit spritzy, it was too earthy, it was too high acid, it didn't fit their little idea of what a Pinot Noir should taste like. So they didn't understand it. So they threw it back in our faces. So, and then we had this, me and you and the chefs and, people like Scott and another friend of mine, Kane Volcon, who's another chef at my Vita. We had started this thing called Beer Club, because we were only allowed it was on Saturdays. So Sundays, the restaurant was closed, so everybody could, afford to have a couple of drinks on a Saturday night because nobody had to work the next day. And then we were only allowed Maritz Lager, which is a lager from Barcelona, as our knockoff. That was the company-wide policy, and we just got, after many, many years of Maritz for knockoffs, you just, fucking can't stand it. It's just like, it tasted so gross. I'm like, my palate is scarred with Maritz. I mean, nowadays, like I tried having one like about a year ago, and it still like, was a bit too triggering, and I wasn't ready for another Maritz. But and I'm sure a lot of my Vita employees feel that way. So we started this thing. Was like, okay, let's all bring like an interesting beer to drink instead of Maritz after work, and everybody did like a little bit of research, and we had to talk about it. And then Beer Club turned into like Cider Club, turned into Pet Nat Club, turned into Wine Club. It was just like kind of the natural progression of like those flavor profiles, those weird yeasty, oxidized, strange things that we found and like that everybody enjoyed in sherry, then enjoyed in cider. We could then taste them in like naturally sparkling wine, and then into skin contact wines, and that was really the story. We just all got into really funky stuff.
Well, that extraordinary journey that you went on with wine led you to leave Melbourne and move to Sydney, and you ended up being the GM with LP's Quality Meats and Bella Bruta, and part of the opening of Bella Bruta. What was it like working in those venues and creating your own wine list?
It was amazing. Like working at LP's was like, I don't know, my favorite hospitality experience. Like those guys are just so wonderful. Like Luke and Tanya are just like the most amazing operators and just really great humans. And they gave me some really amazing opportunities to sort of work with wine and kind of learn the ropes, learn on the job. Writing, it's one thing buying wine for your mates at a dinner party, to go with some, go with like pulled pork tacos or whatever you're cooking. But and you can bring the craziest thing, and everybody will probably like it. But it's a very, very different thing when you've actually got to list wine for a business. You can't just put cool stuff on that you'd like to drink. Like, it's not really about you. You've got to kind of take your ego out of it and be like, what does the business need? What is the restaurant? What is the menu? What's the food? What the focus of LPs is not the wine list. The focus is Luke's amazing food and like house-made charcuterie and things coming out of the smoker back then and what works best with that. And it wasn't necessarily my favorite wines. So, but then I was then exposed to all these other. My palate kind of changed, and I developed more of an appreciation for things like Italian varieties like Sangiovese and Nebbiolo and South American things like Malbec and there's things that went better with the meat and worked better with the menu and there's obviously a few little kooky things that I was really wanted to be on there, but generally speaking, it was kind of like this is not about me. This is about what's good for the restaurant, what's good for the business. That was a really interesting kind of a really great learning experience.
Well, you've always taken the intimidation out of that wine experience. Can you tell us what makes a great wine experience in a restaurant?
I think for me, I've had lots of really great wine experiences and lots of not so good ones. And I think the main thing is you just got to find the right wine for the right person. Like, it's not about, pushing, it is about with the right person. It is the right customer who's receptive to, trying new things. You just kind of got to read the room, read the customer, right? Like, and then find the wine that they're ready for, that they want. Like, it's not, if people don't like orange wine, that's totally fine. Like, if people don't like, Pet Nat or Lambrusco or things like that things that I have now grown accustomed to really liking. It's like, that's totally fine. Like, it's not about me. It's about what is good for the customer. What are they eating? And like for someone, but I think it also is really important to, the same way as you eat at a restaurant, you eat things that you normally wouldn't cook at home or you haven't had before, or different combinations. And I think it's important for wine experiences to be, if it's, the customer's receptive to it, to open them up to new varieties, new areas, things like showing people that, here's a wine that's grown in Queensland. Here's, here's a wine from Slovenia. Here's a wine from, the Canary Islands. Like, getting people excited about things that are not just, Barossa Shiraz and Clare Valley Riesling, things that are, a bit more left of centre, I think, but also not kind of oversaturating them and confusing them with, wines that are a bit too avant-garde for where they are in their journey.
The focus at Paranormal Wines is on minimal intervention wine. Can you tell us a bit about that and what you love about them?
I don't know. I just think that, wine has just become like one of the most important things in my life now. And it's just because, I don't know, it's just crazy that all these things can come from one plant, Venice vinifera, like every single, they've all got, it's all from the same plant, but all the different things that can be done with just one ingredient, really. Like, making cocktails is amazing, but, you need to, like, maybe you put 5 or 6 things together and come up with this amazing kind of intricate, layered, thought-provoking thing, whereas you can have that same experience. And for me, nowadays I find a more profound experience by just opening up a bottle and just tasting one thing, one element. It's just Cabernet Franc, or it's just Chardonnay. I think that's really magical, and the way that people can do all the things that they can do. They can age things in oak, they can leave things on skins, they can add must to re-ferment things. They can, there are rules in winemaking, but there's kind of no rules in natural winemaking to a certain extent. It's just a really profoundly, I don't know, exciting thing. And it's like, it's all, as natural as these wines are, it's the winemakers that are real kind of heroes. Like, they take, a raw ingredient and turn it into something that, I'll drink something. I've drunk something, as most people that are into wine, I could tell you a bottle of wine that I had 3 years ago that just like completely spun me out, or, had a really profound emotional, a reaction. And you always, it's like great meals, you remember where you were, remember what the weather was like, you remember who you were with. You have those real moments, and it's the same with me with food as well. I love, food as much as I love wine, and you have those moments that really like encapsulate, whether it's like, a steak à poivre in a bistro in Paris, drinking a bottle of Hervé White Gamay from the Northern Rhone, or if it's like, down at the lake, like Burley Griffin eating fish and chips, drinking a bent spoke, it's like they really capture, I don't know, in me, they capture kind of a moment and a real kind of emotional reaction. So, yeah.
I think one of the real interesting things is you worked with a local winemaker to produce the house wine. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, so Sam Lation, who makes Melaleuca wines out in Yass, he's become a really good friend of mine over the years. We used to sell a lot of his wine at LPs, and particularly at Bella Bruta, the pizza shop. And he was like, at that stage didn't have representation, so he used to, didn't have a distributor, so he used to, he'd like, courier you things at the last minute. He would like bend over backwards to get you a wine on time. Like if you sold out of something, he would like, I think one time he even like just jumped in a car and drove from Canberra to Sydney to just drop off all this wine. It's just amazing. And his religion, we had lots in common. Like he used to play in a band, loves music, loves kind of interesting wine. I just really liked his wine, and then met him, and then we just got on really well, and then we just kind of started chatting. And once we moved to Canberra, and I got to go out before COVID and help him make a wine, which was totally amazing. The house wine. So last year in Canberra with the bushfires, like nobody could make any wine. Like all the fruit was smoke tainted and fucked. So people like Brian Martin from Ravensworth, he had to get wine from, he got grapes from Western Australia. He got grapes from,
Wow.
the Riverlands. He set up all these amazing, like, called in all the favours, and ended up, trying to, because they had to salvage something, the whole year. That's like their whole, one harvest is their, their year's earnings, And Sam, did something similar. He worked he ended up getting some really great quality grapes from the King Valley in Victoria, one of which he made into an aligoté, and the other one, which was a Gamay, which he ended up making a rosé out of, which ended up being the Paranormal Rosé. So, we're very lucky to be selling exclusively through the shop, and we're in talks with some other winemakers about doing project wines in the future. So, that's pretty exciting.
So you've created this business, which is part bottle shop and also wine bar. You can enjoy the experience. What would be a typical experience at Paranormal Wines?
I would like to think it would be, somebody would come in. We're not going to take any bookings. This whole Paranormal Wines business model was to try and make it kind of as far away from a restaurant as possible, to kind of really strip it back into being like just about the wine. I mean, we didn't have much money to do the fit out, so the fit out's pretty minimal. It's just like bunning shelves with a lot of wine on them. The experience I would like to think was, somebody comes in and the great thing about the ACT with liquor licensing is you can kind of have on and off premise in the same room, which you can't do in New South Wales. That's why all pubs have like off licenses, which you have to have a separate entrance and a separate room. You can't just be sitting in a bar and then be enjoying a glass of wine and be given a bottle over the bar to take home. You have to go into a separate room, which is, you don't have to do that in Europe, that's for sure. So we're really lucky with the licensing in Canberra that people can come in and buy a bottle, but they can also taste. We're going to do about 6 or 7 things by the glass. So people which is a really great gateway point to introduce people to things like orange wine and pet nats and reds that are quite light. So we chill them down, and so people can kind of try before they buy. And so, because the last thing I want is someone to be pushed into buying a $50 bottle of wine that they take home and they open and they think's gross and they don't understand it, and they're like, well, I hate natural wine now and I'm not going back to Paranormal Wines because, and it's just like, again, it just comes back to like giving the customer like the right wine for the right setting, and yeah, like there's wines that that I don't expect everybody to like everything, but yeah, that's really great that we can actually serve in, and then I can have a bit of a dialogue about the wine with them, and the producer or the variety or the area, and I kind of like to think of it, and I would like to think of it as like kind of like a record shop, right? So I learning about music, I learned a lot about music through my older stepbrother Sam and his friend Jeremy, that owns a record shop called Slowback Records on Cuba Street in Wellington, and I was like be listening to like, I don't know, Blur or Radiohead or something like that, and I'd walk in as a 16-year-old, and Jeremy or Sam would be like, what are you listening to at the moment? And I'd be like, oh, blah blah blah, a certain record, and they would like give me like 5 records that were like really seminal versions of like, oh, you like the Strokes, here's the Velvet Underground or the Stooges, or here's here are all the influences, here's all the kind of, here are these amazing little offshoots, and here's a side project by this person, and la 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 la, and I like to, and I just got my horizons like broadened really quickly in a really amazing way, and I'd like to think that if I can capture some of that with wine at the shop, I'll be very happy. That idea that people come in and they say, oh, I like I like Ravensworth wine, and then I get to then point them in the direction of, say, some really great Chiantis, or some more interesting, some sort of wines that are influenced influences on Brian, and and that learning in that kind of, in that way that's kind of expansive, and hopefully like fun, and the main thing with the venue, I just don't want it to be pretentious. I think just wine is just so fucking pretentious. I just want it to be I want it to be fun and not scary. I don't want to be I just thinking back to my 18-year-old self being terrified of not knowing whether a word on the label was the area or the grape or the producer or the DOC or the or the appellation. I just want to kind of try and strip that back as best I can.
Well, you do a great job of that, and I think you're really going to broaden the horizons of many people in the capital. And as a resident, I'm pretty stoked that you're opening Paranormal Wines. Max, it's been great to hear your story. Good luck with the venue.
Thanks very much, man.
Please keep in touch, and we'll talk again soon.
Awesome. Thanks very much, Huck.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we share the stories of Australia's hospo community, suppliers and producers in search of hope during this pandemic. Special thanks to executive producer Rob Locke for making this all happen. Follow us on Instagram at Deep in the Weeds Podcast, or email us at podcast@deepintheweeds.com.au. Stay safe and be well.